Mr. Mayor, it's time.
I'd like to call this meeting to order. If you please stand and join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mayor Donald Hewitt.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tempore Margaret Morales. Present. Councilmember Rich Lindemann.
Present.
Councilmember Dania Costa. Present. Councilmember Ray Shelton.
Present.
Councilmember Michael Valdenegro.
Present.
Councilmember Jose Grijalva.
Here.
Interim City Manager Don Prince.
Present.
City Attorney Juan Pablo Flores.
Present.
City Treasurer Luis Pedrosa.
Present. Thank you. Item number 4, presentation discussion pertaining to an update on the golf course as presented by James Bosco Selchow, Board Chairman for the Douglas Public Facility Municipal Property Corporation. I have to inform the public that the gentlemen that are here to present to us tonight, Mr. Selchow and Mr. Durazo and Mr. Forsyth are from the barrio. Okay? We all grew up together, and so I just want you to all, and that's what I'm saying, we all grew up together, and so I just want to make that known up front, that if you can imagine how that neighborhood was back in the day, you'll get a brief glimpse of this. So, Mr. Pedrosa and Mr. Selchow, all yours.
Over here.
Right here, if you can sit down and be relaxed, or just don't take your shoes off.
All right. Well, first of all, Mr. Mayor, Council, thanks for having us here tonight. You kind of stole my thunder right now. So. All three of us grew up on the same street, but Mr. Hewish grew up on a little offshoot of San Antonio Drive. So. But now that you're the mayor, we'll let you into the club.
Thank you very much.
San Antonio Drive.
Well,
Mr. Valdenegro, you've got a ways to go yet. You haven't been there long enough.
They were all older than me. I just want to make that known too. They were all older than me, and I had to beg to play with them.
You were Kenny and Janine's little brother.
That's right.
Yeah. So, whatever you'd like to do.
I'll handle the presentation.
Okay. Mr. Pedrosa put together these slides today so that we could go over some things there.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. We'll go through these slides. Just the first one gives a little bit of a history of the MPC and how it's made up. The MPC was formed in 2015. It's a mayor and council appointed board to manage the golf course. It's currently comprised of 7 members. There was a concessionaire agreement established for the operations and management of the golf course, and agreements as to how that the arrangements would be made and obligations of both parties. The city would provide a subsidy while MPC would be mostly in charge of all the operations of the golf course. Some of those main activities are there on the slide, which is the MPC were to offer golf-related activities, which includes the RV park, the bar, and should also say the event hall. The city would provide the water service and subsidy, as well as the city's government series liquor license. The agreement currently states that MPC was to be in charge of the building maintenance, and the city would be in charge of the greens. Just for the actual operations is kind of the opposite. MPC is actually taking care of the greens, and the city mostly takes care of building stuff, electrical things that need repair. So Just for practical purposes, that's basically the way it's actually operating, although the concessionaire agreement says otherwise. The MPC operates on revenue generated from the golf course, bar, RV park, and event hall, and rental and the subsidy of the city. What are the amenities that the golf course offers? Most of us know that it's an 18-hole golf course with a driving range. We have a bar, event hall, pro shop, 28 RV spaces. Some of the things that happen out there is, we get visitors year-round, stay at the RV park. Some of them, as far as Canada, maybe Bosco can speak more to that as far as what we get. But it's the other thing that's very apparent there, and something that's a sense of pride is the 85th consecutive year for the Labor Day tournament that's been put on here by these folks. And just last year, to give you some figures, it's the utilization of the golf course, 5,015 rounds of golf were played. That does not include any of the tournaments that were hosted.
No, it's just going back to the RV park. Unfortunately, that RV park has been full since April and May, with the construction workers from the border wall. Normally, that time of year, we don't have a whole lot of RVers out there at this time, but it's been full for that amount of time, and it's been a godsend for the golf course. I'll tell you, it's really kept our revenues up, and because in the interim, from March till just about a month ago, we had closed the bar down, so our bar revenues were way down, but our RV park revenues were way up, so they kind of offset each other, and we were able to stay open and so forth. But yes, and we just did complete our 85th annual Labor Day tournament, 85 consecutive years in a row that we've held that tournament. We cut back on the number of people this year just due to the virus issues and so on, but we still had a real good turnout. A lot of people from out of town, and then a lot of in-town people as well, and it went off very well. Nick and Tachi were basically the organizers of that tournament, along with other members of the Golf and Social Club. It went off really well. Those number of rounds played there, 5,015, that's the number of just usually our daily rounds. When we have a tournament or something like that, most of the time our people don't sign in because they pay at a different table, whoever's hosting the tournament or whatever, and then whoever's hosting the tournament pays for the green fees of those people. So you could probably add another, I would say, 600 to 700 rounds to that number, and that would be a more accurate number of rounds that were played last year. And during this period of time with COVID, we have actually seen quite a few new faces out playing golf. I think people were tired of sitting at home doing nothing, and we have actually seen new people coming out there. And we're just hoping they'll continue to come out and be regulars out there with us.
Real quick, Mr. Selchow, does that include your golf team?
No, so it doesn't include the golf.
It doesn't include the golf.
Moving on to the financial side, just an idea of the subsidy. Since inception of the MPC for the past 5 years, 192,000 in 15-16, 183,000 in 17, 198 in 2018, 164 in 2019, 180 in 2020. So we've been averaging for the last 5 years about 183,000 in the actual subsidy. Before you is the financial report as of June 30th, 2020. I know it's a lot of figures there, but it's basically a comparison of the budget, and the columns there depict of what the MPC it takes in or pays for, and what the city pays for. So those different columns show that. Basically, the bottom line on the revenue is that we did exceed the forecasted revenue of 181,000. We actually collected 218,000 for the year. It's about 121% collected, or $37,000 more than we expected. As far as the expenses are concerned, the city, as part of the subsidy, handles certain expenses for the MPC. Part of those being the DOC labor. As Mayor and Council know, we contract with that service, and we already have those payment terms established, so we cover that. We cover other contracts that just are part of the city. It just makes sense for us to utilize those contracts and receive those discounts, such as the pest control, porta pots, fire extinguishers, certifications. We also take care of the utilities. Those are already established contracts that we have within that. And as we mentioned, the building maintenance is something that we been helping the MPC out with. We also purchased the gas for the golf carts. Again, that's a contract that we've had. We also purchased. We took out a lease for the golf carts on behalf of the MPC. We needed the cities to back them up in order to acquire that loan. So we also have to purchase the liquor for that, because it's the city's liquor license. So we make that expense, as well as the liability insurance required to operate that. Overall, for the year, as mentioned, the city subsidy was a total of $180,119. The MPC's expenses, which are comprised of mostly the employees that are out there working the greens and the bar, the overall everyday expenses of maintaining the grounds, and different items to operate the operations of the bar. They spent $204,375. So overall expenses for the year were $384,494. And as far as the projected amounts, we did go over that by about 20,000, which was about 106%. Well, it still ended up in the black by $13,792. And we did budget $170,000 for the subsidy. Did go over by about $10,000, but again, well within the average that we're expected to. This year we did increase that to $180,000, knowing just what the numbers have been in the past. So just want to mention that.
Okay, those, starting on the left up there, you can see that we do have some areas of the golf course that look really, really good. And then we have some that look really, really bad. Back in, I would say, early April, we were asked to cut back on our water usage at the golf course. So we were told we could water the greens and the tee box areas, and that's what we're still doing that now. And of course, we didn't get any rain. And the pictures on the far right kind of show you what's happened. It's some of it is really, really bad. The back nine are the newest 9 holes we have. Those are the pictures on the right. And the front 9 holes held up okay. We didn't water them as much as we normally do. We were just trying to keep the greens alive because it's very expensive to replace those. But that's, those cracks in the ground and just the lack of grass that grew this summer. pretty bad. I don't really know if it's gonna come back or not in the fall, next year. I hope so. Again, you can see we have, two different types of areas out there. We have dirt in the fairways, but up by the greens and the surrounding the greens is very nice, for the most part. On this, Mr. Pedrosa had asked us what our most pressing needs are at the golf course at this time. Well, it was very easy to answer. The irrigation system on the back nine is very bad. It's almost non-functional. It's supposed to be totally automated, run by a computer in one of the buildings, and it has to all be done manually. And it has to be done at, you have to go over here and open valves and turn on the pump, let it run, go turn off the pump, turn the valves open. It takes one man 8 hours just to water 9 holes all day. But that's a very big issue with us right now. Our RV park being full right now, our RV park is very outdated. If you know about RVs, most of the newer RVs today, the bigger ones require 50 amp service. We have 2 slots in our RV park that have 50 amp service. The rest of them have 30 amp service. And it has been under a lot of strain this summer, I'll tell you. I know Max Tapia sees my name on his phone and he cringes every time he sees me. But we had a lot of issues this summer, especially when it got really hot, because all of those construction workers came home at the same time. The first thing they did, turn on that air conditioning, and it wasn't good for a while, but we kind of got it straightened out. A lot of our equipment out there is very, very old. We have purchased a few used mowers in the past 2 years, but the rest of it is pretty old and worn out. We do use them, we don't use them much, but we have, I think it's a 1961 tractor that still runs sometimes. But we just, even the building itself, built in 1936, I don't know if many of you know that, it was built by the WPA in 1936. It's got a lot of historical value to it. What else do we, the maintenance, our maintenance building, should I go into that? That maintenance building was condemned by OSHA many years ago. I don't know how long ago. I just found that out recently, but we're still using it. Right now we have 2 full-time employees outside, 1 part-time employee outside. We have 2 full-time employees inside and 1 part-time bartender that work on the inside. Inmates, we normally use inmate labor throughout the year, but of course we haven't had inmates since March, and it really has, you can really tell the difference out there with not having inmates, just the little things that they do for us out there. I wasn't a big fan of having inmates out there, but now that they're gone, I wish they'd come back. But as far as we've heard, it might not be till November, December till we get them back, if we get them back. Any questions?
Mayor, I have a question.
Please, Mr. Renner.
Thank you, Mr. Telcho. Did you mention that the bar was closed?
It was closed. We had kept it closed, since the beginning of all this COVID stuff, and then they kept making different. The governor kept making different. What do you call those? Requirements. And eventually, we were allowed to open. Because we have a Series 5 government license, we were under different rules than the regular bar and other places. So eventually we were allowed to open, but I didn't feel comfortable opening at the time, so we kept it closed about another month and a half longer till we only opened it maybe a month ago, maybe just a month ago, and very, very limited. We have very, very few places to sit in there, very few tables. The dining room area, we have been able to utilize that part. Well, we serve burgers and wings out there on Thursday nights, and we have been able to use that with a limited capacity as well. And But yeah, I didn't feel comfortable opening it to the full capacity. So we're still at a somewhat limited, but we're doing okay.
What is the average people that can be in there with this COVID and stuff? Is there a count?
Yeah, in the dining room, we're limiting the people in the dining room to 50. It has a capacity of 250, but we limit it to 50 right now. And in the bar area, it is another 250, but we limited that to maybe 20.
Right. But it is open.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Yes, it is open.
Now, I was just thinking, you mentioned the gas golf carts. How would you feel if at some point in the future we could start changing those over to electric?
Yeah, we could do that. We used to have, many years ago, we used to have all electric carts. And then that was many, many years ago. And for whatever reason, we switched over to gas carts because we could rent out the parking spaces in the back at that time and make more revenue by renting out the spaces. So we went to gas, so we didn't have to charge them.
Sure.
But now we don't have as many people that utilize the parking area or bring their private carts in anymore. So, yeah, we could go back the other way. Yeah.
No, I'm just thinking that, in this day and age for environmental circumstances, if nothing else, that would be a selling point, all electric, come to Douglas.
Yeah, but cost-wise, they're, in terms of purchasing the golf carts, there's really not a big difference.
Okay.
But you can look at it either way. You got to put gas in one, or you got to put batteries in the other.
Sure.
They kind of balance each other out.
Yeah, the one thing I've always been wondering about is, years ago, the council was all hot and heavy about foot golf. Does that get any traffic? No. So I always thought that was kind of a waste of money.
That went nowhere.
What do we
In
do?
fact, I could tell you, I saw maybe 2 people do that.
So is that space still there?
No, we took them out.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. All right, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Lindman. I think why we invited you here and why we wanted you here this evening, which you've done very well in making that presentation of what's going on out there. And I think we as a council at a future date need to sit down and have a good, long, hard talk on what we want to do. Whether or not we want to invest fully into the golf course, or we literally want to let it waste away. And so that's what I would like to challenge each of the council members to speak with your constituents to see what they feel about the need for the golf course. I, for one, think it's a valuable asset and a jewel of our community. But we need to talk about the investment in it, because there's no sense having it if we're not going to invest in it. So that's why I wanted the golf course to come to show us what's going on out there and where we're at and what's the potential and what we can do. What I'd like to ask Bosco or Nick or Tachi or whoever would like to chime in, what do you view as some of the possible solutions to get it back to where it needs to be, and how we can use it to better market Douglas?
Well, I was going to mention this earlier too. I really feel that we're missing the boat in terms of golf, in Southern Arizona, with not the golf course in Naco closing. We have a good base of local people that play on a regular basis. Okay, we do get people from out of town. We get regulars that come down from Bisbee every week. We get other people from, some come in from Sierra Vista once in a while, and we get different people. What would help the golf course the most to get back to where it could be? And I'm not saying it could look like a resort style golf course or anything like that. Is the irrigation. It just needs water. That grass will grow. We just got to get the water to it.
Okay.
And if you look at the majority of the people that are playing golf out there right now, gosh, you know, a high percentage of them are senior citizens. You know, there are a lot of younger people that are playing golf, but there is a lot of senior citizens that play golf on a daily basis. And, you know, it benefits them. It all in turn benefits the golf course having those people out there. But like I said, all we really need is to get water to the golf course so that we can grow grass. People want to play on grass. They don't want to play on dirt. As far as marketing, did you have a question, Mr. Shaw?
No, I'll comment after
Okay.
you.
As far as marketing the golf course, I told Mr. Pedrosa and Ms. Prince the other day, the best marketing tool in golf is word of mouth. Right now, if you went to Tucson or Sierra Vista or somewhere else and mentioned Douglas Golf Course, they could tell you that it's not in very good condition. Okay? Because the word of mouth spreads very rapidly. Right now, Fort Huachuca is the hot spot for golf right now. It's in immaculate condition. Of course, they have unlimited resources, you know. But it's anybody can tell you that right now.
Well, I did have a gentleman who's fairly new to our community mention to me that he put his good clubs away and got back out his old clubs when he goes out to play out there, and I understand why. Mr. Shelton?
Yes, you know, this could be a very big draw to Douglas, not just from Cochise County, but people, once again, that want to come, you know, from Canada, from Montana, from, you know, and I know they come. And, you know, since I've been here, you know, we've lost a good part of downtown. We've lost PB. We've lost the railroad. We've lost the hospital. We've lost the newspaper. We've lost Safeway. We've lost the bowling alley. We've lost the movie theater. And man, this is something, this is sort of a jewel, I really believe, that the city of Douglas needs to keep and probably put as much into it as we can. Now here's another question. How many belong to the golf club, approximately?
Are you talking about
Yeah, here in Douglas, you know.
the Golf and Social Club?
Right, yes.
Okay.
Well, both, yeah.
Actually, for the Douglas Golf Course itself, we really don't have memberships.
Okay.
We sell daily fee, we sell a punch pass, or we sell a monthly pass. Okay? We don't really sell a membership. Now,
Yeah, okay.
I'll let Nick answer the other question. Are you there, Nick?
Currently, we have 99 active members in the Douglas Golf and Social Club. We also have 3 junior members, which are members of Boston's golf team. And we pay their fees for them to be so that they can have their handicap. And then we have probably a dozen social members that just want to be a part of the entity, and they join as a social member only. But we're right at 102 members right now.
Is there any way the clubs could maybe have fundraisers and maybe send out letters to the ones that come to the tournaments and the ones from Douglas and maybe have some fundraisers to help with this
Well, currently we do have once a month
tournament?
our MPC board. We put on a tournament and raise funds for the golf course itself. Okay, it goes right back to whatever we need on the golf course. That's generated. We just had one Sunday, and after everything was said and done, we made $500, and you know that adds up month after month. So, and Nick was talking about the Douglas Golf and Social Club. That's a separate entity from the golf course. It's just a group of guys and women that we join it, our membership. We get a handicap through the Golf and Social Club, and they also put on a tournament once a month. It's a totally different group of people, but that's the majority of the people that play golf also belong to the Golf and Social Club.
Okay, well, I think we have our information. I'm sorry, is there something else? Please.
Thank you,
Mayor.
Mayor. The first thing I want to say is, I have gone to administration and I have complained about, why does the golf course look like this? Why are we, this. And I appreciate you coming here and letting us know, because for me, it's my failure for not reaching out, because I did not know that you had these needs. So I want to apologize for my lack of leadership on that. And you all have my information. I'd like to work with you to see how we can help you raise funds for this. Like you're saying, it's something simple like more water. We need, if we can help you out with that. And now you come here tonight and you tell us, hey, the people from the wall are living there, so now you're getting income. I mean, if we didn't have COVID and, they were there, I mean, how much more funds would you have? How much more revenue would be coming in? I'd like to keep in contact and see what events we can have out there. If you all don't know, the IDA is helping the city out with a big screen for a drive-in and just movies at the park. Maybe we can have something out there at the golf course. You can open up, the food and the beverage there and help get some revenue in that way. I think we need to have find out ways to help you out more with that, because like you're saying, we're really, with Napo closing, we're the only game here. So if we can get people to come here and play golf, I mean, that would be extraordinary. So I just want to thank you, and you'll be hearing from me more, and I'll be sure to reach out and see what we can do to help you out with that. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you for having us. I'd also like to invite any of you to come to our meetings. We meet the third Tuesday of every month. We meet at the golf course, and you're all welcome to come. And if you'd ever like to come out and just take a ride around the golf course, we can get you a golf cart and take a look, see what you think. It's not in the greatest of condition right now, but we're working real hard to get it back to what it used to be, and maybe even better.
Yes.
Hey, one more comment. I wanted to bring up yet again the idea, and I know it's been rehashed before, but we've got to have a plan to send some of our excess effluent out to the golf course, and that, I think, would help with the water situation. And I think it's doable, but we've got to put our minds together to do that. We've got the excess coming out of Bay Acres now. So soon, we'll have to expand the treatment plant again. Well, let's utilize some of that water. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Letterman. Appreciate it.
One more thing. I just wanted to mention also, I know I saw some pictures the other day. We are having a lot of, ever since school got out last spring, we've been having a lot of, I guess you could call it vandalism on the golf course, especially on the back nine, the apartments and the housing development. ATVs riding on the golf cars, people stealing our flags. They don't steal them, they just take them out and they throw them in the pond out there and stuff like that. And we have some cameras out there that we see people coming on and off the golf course. We have a lot of people that utilize the golf course to walk with. They walk their dogs, they ride their bikes, and I don't have a problem with that. I mean, those people stay on the cart paths and that. But the other people that are on the golf course with their ATVs, and I know you saw a picture the other day of a white sign that sign was hit by an ATV. It came around the corner and ran into that sign.
Okay.
So just wanted to bring that up. I have contacted the HOA at the housing development.
Okay.
They said they would send out notices to the members of their HOA to stop riding out there. So.
Thank you. Ms. Morales?
Mayor, I just wanted to ask you, please leave your contact information with cell phone numbers so we could reach out to you. I'd like to reach out to you.
Sure.
That was all. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Forsyth?
Yeah, Mayor and Council, I just want to put some information out there. Mr. Selchow earns $0 as the president of the NPC. he's a volunteer. Mr. Alvarado works the same way. Mr. Durazo is a volunteer out there myself. And there are members that we ask questions. Oh, they go research stuff about the panel for the pump, and they're bringing information. There's a lot of people in our organization that are doing this because they love the golf course and they want to keep it functional. People going out there, they buy ant grow and go out there and spread it on ant holes to get rid of the ants. But there's a lot of people that are working behind the scenes that we don't even know about, and people like Bosco need to be commended for his effort that he put in for the last few years to try to keep things running for the city of Douglas.
Exactly, and we truly appreciate it, and thank you very much. Item number 5, presentation discussion by Mike Townsend of Public Safety Personnel Retirement System and Mark Reeder of Stifel, Nicholas and Company, Inc., a private financial service firm pertaining to the Public Safety Retirement System bond alternative.
Thank you, Bosco, and everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
While we set up house for these guys, I just wanted to mention to the council that this presentation can get a little technical, and so feel free to raise your hand, and these guys will stop and make sure that we're still on the same page and understand where we're at. Does that make sense? Is that fair enough for everybody to do that? Okay. Anybody need a break? We're all good? Good? Everybody good or need a break?
How long is this?
Unfortunately, about 45 minutes or so, unless we have a lot of questions. I told them an hour at the most. Or asked them, I shouldn't say I told them. I asked them to please keep it to an hour. So I think we'll start off with Luis. Is that okay, Ms. Prince? To start off with Luis, and then he'll introduce. We have one, Mr. Townsend, who will be joining us via Zoom, as we see over there, and then Mr. Reeder's here with us, who's very familiar with Douglas, and it's good to see him back in our community. So, Mr. Pedrosa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to start off by saying this is a very important matter. Council that has been here with us knows about our PSPRS issues and how we've tried to manage these in the past, and just the challenges that we've had in our budget to try and mitigate and manage the expenses associated with this program. This is a challenge facing not just Douglas, it's facing all Arizona cities and probably most cities across the country. Today we have 2 presenters that will hopefully show us, first of all, educate us on what PSPRS is, and that's our public safety pension system for our police officers and firefighters. They are separate than civilian staff, regular staff. We have our own ASRS pension system. So it operates a little bit differently. There's different components, and I'll let the experts talk about that. But I just want to kind of set things up and let you guys know what we're expecting here tonight. First off will be Mike Townsend, who's very generously is here with us. He's the administrator of the PSPRS program. He'll be talking about the actual pension system, how it works, what are the issues, where does Douglas stand, and as Mayor said, please feel free to concept that is not understandable, please let us know, because this is not necessarily a very straightforward matter, but very important that we understand it and know how it works. And then next up is Mr. Mark Reeder, who is with Stifle, Nicholas and Company. You can correct me on that, but he's here to present a possible solution that the city can consider, mayor and council can consider, and he'll be discussing the specifics and financials towards that. So with that said, I think we'll get started with Mike Townsend. Mike, I hope you can hear us. I hope everything is good on your end on the technology side.
Hey, thank you for the introduction. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. And so Mr. Reeder is there. I believe he's going to go through the screens for me. Before I start going through the presentation, I thought it would be good just to kind of give you a little bit of my background so you understand where I'm coming from. I started with PSPRS last December, so Friday this week will mark 10 months that I've been with the system. Prior to that, I spent the previous 25 years in local government working for both the City of Flagstaff and Coconino County. I was a trustee on the Arizona State Retirement System Board for 7 years, with 2 years as the board chair, where I really started to get an interest and understand pensions. And one of the primary reasons that I decided to take this position with PSPRS was to work on the communication and try to work on solutions, because quite frankly, I was very frustrated working at Coconino County, trying to get an understanding of what was going on with the cost and how pensions work. And it's very important to local governments because it is complicated, but it is a big cost to taxpayers. And so, first of all, I just like to acknowledge your willingness to have this conversation, to try to understand it and get to solutions to help your taxpayers. This is a big step, and it's not easy, and so I appreciate that. Mr. Reeder, if you want to go to slide 2. To really talk about pensions, we really need to start at the beginning and get an understanding of where we are. Yeah, that's good, Mark. And to get an understanding, I think it's important to have that holistic approach and really understand, first of all, the past, understand how we got here, to plan to make better decisions into the future. One of the cliches that I always talk about with pensions, and what I found that where we are with PSPRS was, we have a huge unfunded liability. It's going to cost money. The thing that you need to do and realize that you're in the hole is you have to stop digging. And so I want to go through what happened in the past and what should have been made, which brings us to the present. So that's kind of looking at the strategic changes made both from the legislature, the voters, and then internally at the PSPRS, the changes taking place. And then also the future. How are we going to manage this going forward? Because if communities, like we're actually looking for solutions and want to find ways to fix this, we have to make sure that we don't get in the same position in the future. Next slide. So starting with that past, how did we get here? I was not part of the pension system when a lot of the things that were in place were put in place, so I can second guess, but I don't really know what the realities were or what they were trying to accomplish. What I know is there were a lot of unintended consequences that kind of created the problem we're dealing with. And the biggest one is what's referred to as the PBI, the permanent benefit increase. And it had multiple different impacts that all had their own little piece on where we are. The PBI, essentially what this was a way to give cost of living increases to retirees. And so how this functioned was 50% or half of the investment returns above 9%, those were actually taken out and set aside. So so the trust has assets, and I think as was stated at the beginning, City of Douglas, you have your own pension plan for your fire department and your own pension plan and for your police department. And that's how the system was structured back in the 70s. And so it's been like this for a lot of decades. And so in your trust, if there's investment returns below the assumed rate of return of 7.3, that investment return below the actuarial assumed rate of return, that all stays in your trust. But if anything earned above 9%, half of that money was taken out. So you only got half of the upside, but you got all of the downside. And that was the way the system was structured. That actually was bad enough the way it was structured, but there was also a double impact because the funds that 50% of the funds that were taken out were actually used to give cost of living increases. So it actually took money away from your assets and actually increased the liabilities going forward. So that was a double impact. The structure of this had disproportionate impacts across the state. The way the cost of living increases were operated under the PBI is the total pool of the increase was set up, whatever that was, a percentage of the total payroll. And then that was split evenly amongst all members. And so traditionally, if you just think back, it kind of makes sense that police officers, firefighters in the metro areas are going to earn higher salaries than those in the rural areas. And so if we're giving the same dollar increase to retirees, the increases in the rural areas are actually going to be a higher percentage of pay, which is a higher percentage increase in the liabilities. So it was even a larger increase on the liabilities for some of those smaller jurisdictions. The other thing is how the PBI operated in terms of actuarial assumptions. So the PBI was funded by returns above 9%. One of the basic actuarial assumptions is that every year going forward for the long term, whether we're looking at 20 years, 30 years, whatever that time frame is, the assumption is we're going to earn the assumed rate of return every year. So one of the basic assumptions that went into the valuation for years was that once the funds in that were set aside were used up, there would be no future PBIs given. That's not what actually happened, because you can see that for 28 consecutive years, we're actually PBIs given, even in years of recession, because of the amount of money that was set up in the fund. So understanding that we lost the downside of the 9%, but all earnings above 9%, we would lose half of the money, but we get all the downside. The investments portfolio was actually changed to try to reduce volatility. So we wouldn't get huge upside during good markets, but we wouldn't get the huge downside either. So it was a way to try to offset the impact of the PBI, which is also going to be a challenge going forward. So if we go to the next slide. So part of this is looking at that past, what happened. I talked about the PBI and what changed. So there were changes made through voter propositions, Prop 124 and 125, to eliminate the PBI, and that put in place a new COLA, more of a traditional COLA capped at 2%, which is much more predictable and factors into the actuarial valuations, much easier to keep track of. And also, it's accounted for, so it doesn't take away from investment returns. Actuarial assumptions, we hired new actuaries, accounting for things, we have an understanding, we're making some changes. I'm going to go into more detail on that. And then I talked about those investment allocations, how we changed that, but there were also a lot of changes in terms of staff and how we're managing the investments going forward. And I'm going to go into a little more detail of that, but I just want to kind of give you this picture to see what happened in the past and what are the things that we're changing now so that we don't keep digging that hole deeper. I'm going to keep rolling. I haven't heard anybody yell at me to stop yet to ask questions, so yeah. Next slide, Mark. Okay. So the legislature in 2016 put in place pension reforms. This was a huge step. It created what we refer to as Tier 3. Tier 1 and 2 are the legacy tiers. So those are the firefighters hired before 2017 because of the pension clause in the state constitution. Once someone is hired, we cannot impair or diminish that benefit promised to them for their career. So we could not go back and change how the pension was structured for people hired before 2017, those tiers 1 and 2. But we created a new tier with a new benefit structure. And then also the way the Tier 3 operates is the contributions are split 50-50. So the employee pays 50%, the employer pays 50%. So it really results in a lower cost to the employer, and it's a way to really manage the cost going forward on that system. I mentioned Prop 124 and 125 on the previous slide. Those were voter initiatives, and that's what did away with the PBI. That was part of the pension reform, so the legislature put that on the ballot. An important thing to understand about these reforms, eliminating the PBI and switching to the COLA. Those savings are already factored into the actuarial valuation. And I'll go into a little bit about the math and how that works and what the valuation is based on. But that's already baked into your number, so to speak, when you're considering your assets and your unfunded liability. System-wide, that savings resulted in about $500 million. So it was a large number, but that's already figured in. And so the important thing to remember is those reforms that were put in place. We stopped adding new members to Tier 1 and 2, but it's not going to change that unfunded liability because it's going to have to be paid because of that pension clause. Those benefits were promised to that group, and by law, we're going to have to meet those. Next slide. So this is more of the present, and this internal about a lot of the changes that have been made. We have reforms that were put in place to stop digging the hole, created Tier 3. I think the other part, though, is the management of the system. How are we taking care of things and managing so that you understand and rely on the information you're getting, the people that are doing the work? When I started last December, one of the things that the board had just become aware of was the general ledger system was being used, was not functioning properly, and did not have proper controls. Part of my job when I started was to get a new general ledger system, hiring staff. The new general ledger is up and running as of July 1st. We also put in place the controls around the cash and contribution processing. We really had no documentation, and a lot of it to go back and make sure that the contributions were accounted for correctly when they come into the system. Directly related to a lot of those issues, we hired auditors. Clifton Larson Allen is a national firm that are considered pension experts in the government realm. So we have an audit firm that has a really sharp understanding of how pensions function and how things should be operated. We hired new leadership positions, as I mentioned, in addition to myself coming on last December. I had several other vacancies. My deputy administrator, I hired Michael Smerrick, who works for the Department of Corrections and then for the Department of Administration. He was the deputy and then the interim state comptroller. He is a CPA, has a very strong background in financial systems. He actually implemented the financial system for the state. When I started in December, I had 2 staff accountants on the accounting staff. And so in that time with Mike Smerrick and myself, we've actually hired a CFO, a controller, and an internal auditor. So now we have a very strong staff. Shortly after I started in December, there were probably a little over a month and a half that I was the only CPA on staff and had a very lean accounting staff. With the hires that we made, we actually have 5 CPAs on staff now. So it's a very strong, very well-experienced staff. We hired new actuaries for the system, which I mentioned earlier. Our actuaries have actually created what we refer to as modelers, which are pretty sophisticated Excel spreadsheets, which include every jurisdiction in Arizona and their public safety pension plans, so that employers can actually go look at their plan, look at expected investment returns, look at contributions going forward, make changes if there's additional contributions put in, to really provide tools to employers to gain an understanding and start to understand how pensions function and what their responsibilities are. IT security upgrades, we had the same thing. We had turnover, and 80% of our IT staff are new, making huge changes around security upgrades to make sure that we have the controls in place for both the personal information that we have, also the transactions and keeping track of the money. The investment opportunities and asset allocation review. One of the trustees that was put on the board is named Terry Papp. He's the chair of our investment committee. He's well respected around the country, and I think he's fortunate to have him. Very intelligent man. He manages investment portfolios for a living. He runs his own firm. And we also have a new CIO, Mark Speed, has been there about 2 years, and they have made significant changes to the asset allocation and managing the investment portfolio. And one of the things that just took place were making significant changes to the actuarial changes and elimination of what we refer to as negative amortization. We just had a presentation to my board of trustees today by the Reason Foundation, who gave us a very high score in terms of our stress test because of the changes we made to the actuarial assumptions that they say puts us on a completely different trajectory to make sure that we're managing these liabilities in the long term and accounting for things correctly. And if any of you are aware of the Reason Foundation, it's a nationwide think tank, I think is the best way to think of it, and very conservative and very involved in government pensions. The advisory committee was actually created with pension reform, and we have reactivated that group. The advisory committee is made up of stakeholders. It includes employer representatives, including Tom Belsheet with the League of Cities and Towns, and we also include some member groups, so that we're getting the perspective from both sides, employers and employees. And the advisory committee actually reviewed the actuarial assumptions being used and made recommendations to the board. We had unanimous approval by the advisory committee, so we had both employees and employers agreeing to that, and unanimous approval by the board, which a lot of people didn't think we'd be able to get the actuarial changes done that fast. So the fact that we did this in 2 months was a huge change. Okay. So on slide 8, I'm going to shift gears here. I was going over kind of the past, present, and kind of what's going on. The future is how we look at things going forward, but I'd like to get now to more of an explanation of pensions and how they operate. If that's okay. I don't know if there's any questions on anything I've covered so far.
Everybody good? Please continue, Mr. Johnson.
Okay. Okay, so in terms of pensions, the thing that we really need to understand is what the numbers are and how the numbers are calculated. So this is what we refer to as a defined benefit. This is very different from what sometimes is called as a defined contribution. As I said, the benefit has been promised, and the benefit is essentially sets out some in statute what the formula is for calculating someone's benefit at retirement. So I have an example. There is an actual benefit. Somebody who works, a tier 1 employee works 25 years. There is a percentage, and that percentage is multiplied by their average compensation and comes up with an annual pension. So the thing to realize here is the numbers are not what's really important here. It's the fact that there is a formula. This is not negotiated later. This is not something we can change. This formula is in statute, and it is going to be calculated when someone reaches retirement. So there will be an actual payment made. The hard part of defined benefit is we're defining what that member gets at the end of their service. And to do that, we have to make certain assumptions and estimates. And so we're estimating what that liability is going to be. If there are more disabilities, if you have higher turnover, if people work longer than we thought they were going to work, if they actually live longer in retirement drawing their pension, that's going to change those estimates. And so we do our best to come out and get as close as we can, but it's really important to understand there is a benefit that's going to be paid. The hard part is estimating what that is going to be when we get there. Okay, go to the next slide. So get to defining how we calculate an unfunded liability. Okay, the assets are kind of an easy side, right? We know based on market values and returns what we have today. So we're looking at the assets as of today. And so to have a comparison, we need to look the same way at liabilities. And so in terms of liabilities, all future, we look at the pension benefits earned as of today. And I think a way to break that down is the previous slide. I had an example of a 25-year employee who's retiring. So if you have a police officer who has worked for 10 years, they have earned 10 years of that total pension that they're going to start earning at some point in the future. The actuaries have a methodology to go through and estimate, well, how much have they earned as of 10 years of that future benefit payment? And whatever that is, there's a future string of payments that's going to start at retirement and continue through their lifetime and potentially their spouse's lifetime through a survivor benefit. All of those future string of benefits are then discounted back to a present value. So we're reducing that future string of payments to a present value. So the liabilities are measured as of today. And they're discounted using the assumed rate of return on assets. So we use that for assumed investment returns in the future, but we also use that for the discount rate. And that's really key. This point that this is a discounted present value of liabilities is really important to understand the math. So the difference between those two numbers gets you to whether you're over or underfunded. Okay, so if your assets and liabilities were the same number in today's dollars, 100% funded. Next slide. The other number that is tossed around a lot is what is your funded status or funded percentage? That is just a statement that you look at those same numbers. In today's dollars, what are your assets, what's the present value of liabilities, expressed as a percentage. And of course, our goal is to get to 100% funded. Next slide. I had a request to provide some information. I didn't have anything really in depth as it came in last night. So if you wanted to understand kind of how you compare to other jurisdictions in terms of Tier 1 and Tier 2 across the state, this is looking at the funded status. Douglas, as of the June 30, 2019 actuarial valuation was around 31 to 32% funded. So you can see that big stack in the middle. There's about $7.6 billion of unfunded liabilities across 57 different plans in the state that are funded between 25 and 50%. And so the city of Douglas unfunded liability is in that big blue line there on the graph. And so you can see what the rollout is. There's not that much in terms of 75 to 100 and not that many in less than 25. So Douglas is kind of in that big piece of the pie in how we look at this. Next slide. Okay, this is a basic formula, the pension funding equation, and this is also to go along with an understanding that we're looking at present value. This is something that's very important when you start to consider what are solutions to deal with the unfunded liability. When you look at this, the right side, the benefits and expenses, the expenses are the cost of operating the system at PSPRS. So those are the uses of the money that come into the trust. The benefits, that B, is the largest number on this page. That is the huge number that we're having to deal with. So if we look at the left side, are the sources of funds, where the money comes from. And this is a very simple formula, and it's important to understand that any money that comes into the trust to pay future benefits is going to come from one of two places. It's either coming from contributions or it's coming from investment returns. That is the only two sources of money. So there's no other source or fund or slush fund or anything. This is the two places where we're ever going to get money into the trust. Next slide. So that unfunded liability, a key concept is expressed as debt on the financial statements for your city. It's part of the footnotes. And the PSPRS liabilities are not pooled for tiers 1 and 2. That is the way the system was set up. Everyone was responsible for their liabilities, and then the assets are pooled together and managed, but we keep track of what is your level of funding in those assets. And as I said, those unfunded liabilities have been earned. There is a formula in place. We're going to calculate it. There's going to be a benefit paid, and so because they are subject to that pension clause. So there is something that's going to be paid. We're estimating, trying to be as accurate as we can, but it is a debt. It is owed, and it is being earned by those employees. The important thing, going back to the money's going to come from one of two places. It's either contributions or it's investment returns. So the amount and timing of your contributions directly impact the funded status of your plan. Every additional dollar contributed today can earn investment returns over the long term going forward. And that's a key concept because the opposite is also true. Every additional dollar that's not paid is a lost opportunity to earn investment returns going forward because the money has to come from one of two places. Next slide. When you pay your contributions, there's two pieces to the contribution. So as we go through looking at opportunities with people and what may be available, it's important to understand the two components. I mentioned that 10-year employee who has earned a percentage of this future string of payments that are estimated by the actuary. In year 11, that police officer would earn one additional year of service, which would earn another incremental percentage increase of those future benefits. Normal cost is what represents the cost of that additional year of service. So the current year they're working and the contributions related to service earned are the normal costs. The other portion of the contribution is an amortization of that unfunded liability. And I think the easiest way to think of this is a mortgage on a house. You owe a debt. And so how do you pay that mortgage off over time on a debt service schedule? It's the unfunded portion of the contribution is amortizing that unfunded debt. Okay, go to the next slide. And this is to give you kind of a larger view. So system-wide, last year for PSPRS, for all the plans together, all those 256, the cash that came into the system for that year, 45% came from investment returns, and then you can see the breakdown of contributions that make up the 55% that came in from the C of that formula, the C plus I. Go to the next slide. So now we're going to drill down and get a little bit more into the City of Douglas numbers and see how this math works. So looking at this chart, that future string of payments that's going to be paid to a member, we come up with the present value of those liabilities. And so the total of that present value, if I look at just Douglas Police, your present value of those liabilities for police is about $26 million. So out of that $26 million present value that needs to be paid out in the future, you have assets of about $8 million. And so you can see just that simple math, your unfunded liability is going to be about $18 million. So this is the simple math about how this works. So this is a snapshot in time, 1 year. So if we go to the next slide. So the thing to remember though is we're estimating earning over the long term 7.3% return on the asset. So Douglas with 8.2 million only has the opportunity to earn those investments on the 8.2 million. So you're kind of missing out because if it was 100% funded, you would be earning investment returns on the full 26. So that's kind of that current payment on the unfunded liabilities, that makes up for that lost opportunity. That's why we're amortizing or setting up as a mortgage payment that unfunded portion of the contribution to make up for that lost opportunity. And the other thing to remember is those payments going forward are anticipated to increase 3.5% a year because the actuaries calculate those as a level percent of pay. The board just put in new actuarial assumptions that are going to transition that and make it to more of a level dollar amount, which would be more what you would be used to with a mortgage, where you would pay the same amount every year. Now, you need to pay more upfront. The way the math works, and I'm going to go through a picture here next, is regardless of your funded status. Whoops, can you go back one more? So regardless of the funded status, that 26 million of your total liabilities, those future string of payments, remember, it's discounted back to a present value. So next year, it's going to be discounted back one less year. which essentially means it's going to increase next year by 7.3%. Okay, now we can go to the next slide. Okay. So essentially what's going to happen is you look at where you are in terms of your assets. You have your beginning FY19 investment returns that come in, and then contributions that are paid along with your payroll for the year estimated. And so at the end of the year, the increase in the assets is going to be 10.4 million. In that same year, okay, going from 2019 to the beginning of 2020 in terms of your actuarially accrued liabilities. You started the year with a little over 26 million in the liability. But remember that present value is going to be discounted one less year. And so the actuarial liabilities are going to increase 1.9 million. If you compare those two numbers, that 2.2 million that you increased assets, your liabilities increased 1.9. So even though you paid contributions in of 1.6 million, you've only gained about $300,000 towards that $18 billion of unfunded liability. And I have this on a picture on the next slide. So that 2019, the numbers we had before, you can see just about 18 million in terms of the unfunded liability. And what's going to happen is that next year, the total graph, that total liabilities is going to increase 7.3% because it's discounted one less year. And then you can see that we added investment returns as the orange stripe, and then the gray are the contributions. But you see at the top how that total increased 7.3. So you're really only just keeping up. You're making not a whole lot of progress because the unfunded liability went from about 18 million down to about 17.7 million. So it's not a lot of progress over 1 year. So we go to the next slide. And again, back to this pension funding equation, right? The money, in terms of chasing those benefits, that big number is the fee, that the money comes from one of two places. It's contributions, it's investment returns. And so what do we have in place to really address this? The way to really, if you're going to reduce contributions, you're going to have to find a way to increase investment returns. Next slide. And so this is a similar breakdown to the other pie chart that I had system-wide. So this shows the amount of money that came into the Douglas system for police investments at 27% of the cash that comes in. And then you can see the breakdown of the contributions there, that largest piece being the unfunded liability contribution at 58%. So this is where we are for the estimates for 2020. Go to the next slide. And this is a voided hypothetical. If Douglas Police were 100% funded, you could see the employee would pay 7%. Normal cost from the employer would be 8%. That would be the contributions would provide 15% of the cash. Investment would be providing 85% of the cash that would go into the system back here. So you can see why the target is really 100%. That's what we're trying to get to. Next slide. The other thing, this gets a little more complicated, so I'll just hit this real high level. I talked about the level percent of pay. The assumption that the actuaries make is your payroll is going to grow by 3% a year, and that's total payroll. So that takes into account turnover, vacancies, all of those things, including fee increases. And so if we calculated your contribution percentage and assumed your payroll is going to grow next year by 3.5%, but it did not grow 3.5%, applying your total payroll to that contribution percentage, you would actually be putting in less than what the actuary assumed. So you would actually be losing more ground than that 300,000 pay down. And so I calculated the difference here. So no, that's okay. We can go to the next slide. So again, that pension formula, going through the math and see how just paying your annually required contributions, when you have a large unfunded liability, it's hard to make a lot of progress towards paying that down. And so in terms of that funding formula, the additional contributions leverage the investment returns. And so getting money up front is really the opportunity, knowing how this pension funding formula works. And so the last bullet here, I had the actuaries calculate this. A $1 million additional contribution now would actually provide savings in terms of future contributions of $1.8 million because of leveraging the opportunities for investment returns. And at the end of that amortization period, you would still have that original $1 million in the fund for the long term, continuing to provide investment returns, paying those benefits. Okay, next slide. And then in terms of that investment return, again, I mentioned it was 7.3%. I don't think I had the number. You can see the returns there we had as of June 30, 2019. We're finalizing June 30, 2020 now. Hope to have those soon, but just to give you an idea of the types of investment returns we've had. And I believe that that is the last, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Townsend, for that very valuable and very clear explanation of what's in front of us and where we have. I wanted to apologize to our fire department. They gave the police example because that's the worst one. So the fire is a little bit better, but it's still the same principle and the same situation that's going on with everyone. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Townsend about how all this works?
Mr. Mayor, if I could frame it into just kind of the budget and how it really is affecting us right now, just to kind of paint a picture of what we just discussed. To give you an idea, the employer, us, the City of Douglas, has to contribute to the pension fund a certain percentage amount of the employee's salary every year. And as Mr. Townsend explained, that liability keeps increasing at a faster pace than we're able to basically catch up. So because of that, our contribution rates keep increasing and increasing to be able to catch up to that unfunded liability and so that we don't fall as far behind. As an example, in 2010, our contribution rate for a police officer for the employer portion was 24.78%. Today, 2021, that percentage is now 84%. So to put it into real numbers, a salary of a police officer of $50,000, we have to contribute $42,000 towards that pension in 2021. So that's really the huge difference of that is basically our costs have gone up 239% since 2010. And based on the projections and the unfunded liability, those costs will keep going up. So I just wanted to put that into our budget terms, our budget perspective. This is something that the council hears about how much did the PSPRH rates go up and how do we fit it into our budget every year. We have that discussion every year. So just want to put that in there. But now I'll hand it over to Mark, who will speak of the solution that we're proposing tonight, and we'll talk specifics there.
Well, thank you, Mr. Pedroza, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, good evening, and thank you very much for extending the invitation for me to come down and present this evening. I know that Mike Townsend wishes he was here due to the complexity of this subject matter, as you just heard, but I appreciate the opportunity to come down and have a face-to-face conversation about pensions. Most of the time, I spend my time working with cities and towns and counties around the state, helping you all with your bond issues to finance public infrastructure. That's pretty much what me and my colleagues, who I'll introduce you to in a moment, do. I've had the privilege of working with Mr. Hewish and Dr. Shelton. I know you were school superintendent, is my recollection. Yes. I remember you as well. And so we spend a lot of time with our clients passing bond elections and ultimately selling bonds for you to finance streets, roads, golf course improvements, things of that nature.
You had to throw that in, didn't you?
That might not have been the right thing to do. So at any rate, long story short, so as we interact with credit rating agencies, so as you know, when we go to sell bonds for a particular city, including the City of Douglas or Douglas Unified School District, what have you, we have to go to the credit rating agencies, and we have to talk to a lot of investors who make a decision to invest in a particular city. And over the years, because the PSPRS, Public Safety Pension Retirement System, for our cities in Arizona, not just Douglas, who nobody's fault really, other than what Mike had shared with you, has continued to grow. And in fact, most of the time what we're seeing is it's our city's largest debt on their books, on your balance sheet, in your audit. If you look at your audit, there's like 10 pages devoted to your PSPRS pension plan. Very complicated. And the liability has grown over the years as a result of what Mr. Townsend just explained to you. And so they're asking us lots of questions. And so I really appreciate staff's leadership, and I appreciate council's leadership to let us help educate you and bring this issue to the surface so that we can show you some potential tools in the toolbox that is not going away. The can has been kicked down the road for a lot of jurisdictions, and we're going to share with you some tools so that you can address. You're not alone. I think in Arizona, the number is really about 11 billion unfunded around the state. State agencies, okay, DPS, universities have it, cities, towns, counties, what have you. In Arizona, the PSPRS problem, challenge out there in our state's about 11 billion. I think it's about 4 trillion national. I see different numbers. One of my colleagues is working with a city in the Midwest. It's 32 billion. So it had to do with the formula created back in the 60s and 70s that essentially guaranteed pension benefits. So most private pension systems, as you know, the employer puts money in, the employee puts money in, and if the investment returns go down, there's not another, if you will, fix on the other side. Does that make sense? I'm hoping this is making sense for you, but I just kind of want to lay the groundwork. For my background, we work for the city and the state and the national issue with it. So we do appreciate you all, the council and staff, investing time. I want to introduce real quick, if you don't mind, because I can't do this by myself, my 2 colleagues up here, Rushda Mustafa, and who's on mute, hi Rushda, and my colleague Omar Dagestani. They work in our Chicago office. Back in January, the city of Flagstaff is one of our clients. And the city of Flagstaff had a $121 million unfunded pension fund. And they were pretty frustrated with it, as are you. And they were looking for solutions. Should they increase taxes? Should they throw more general fund money at it sooner, as Mike said? And so they contacted me and they asked me what I knew about pension financing, which is essentially a refinancing of the PSPRS liability, which we're going to walk you through here in a moment. And I asked Rushda and Omar to join me, and they've been incredible help due to the complexities of the subject matter. So I want to introduce you. I'm going to take the lead on the presentation, and if there's a question that I can't respond to, then they're certainly much more experienced with this than me. If I can take you to page 1. I'm going to try to move fast here, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. I know it's been a long evening. Mike touched on this, but let me give you a quick reminder. Your police unfunded liability as of June 30, 19 is about 18 million. I'm going to round numbers if we don't mind. Okay, that's on your books. Okay, you're about 31% funded. The goal, obviously, for every jurisdiction out there is to be 100% funded, right? You're 31%, you're in the lower quartile. You've entered into an agreement with PSPRS. I'm going to show you this in a moment. You're going to pay that back like a mortgage over the next 19 years, 2039, and you're paying 7.3% essentially to PSPRS that accrues annually on your unfunded component. So that's what Mike was saying, where we have this kind of a negative amortization because you're paying a pretty high rate to them, and your payments, I'm going to walk you through this in a moment, are escalating. Flagstaff was very similar. So we have a legacy, a significant lazy tier 1, tier 2, okay? The good news is we got tier 3 now, right? Tier 1, Tier 2 is the unfunded portion. That's what we want to try to fix. Our fire department in Douglas is about 12 million. Okay? 19 years, escalating payments, so your unfunded liability right now is pushing 30 million. Okay, pretty big. Your largest liability. Your city's done a fantastic job of not having a lot of debt. I'm going to walk you through that in the presentation. All you have is the call center, which has turned out to be, as I understand, a pretty good investment for your city. So you're pretty much, it's unusual to see a city not have some debt on their books for public infrastructure. So good job on that. Your biggest liability at $30 million is your police and fire unfunded. Okay? This is not quite coming up perfectly. Where's our IT? I love IT people. I'm so bad at IT. Number one, PSPRS liabilities are not pooled like ASRS, because our outsider police and fire, our staff's on ASRS. And more appropriate term, as Mr. Townsend mentioned, it is a debt and it is constitutionally protected. We're going to go through an alternative here, which we hope you find of interest. I think, as you know, we spent the last 3 or 4 months with staff, and the staff's done a great job. Hours and hours looking at this prior to coming to council. All right, so as you ponder this decision, how do you address your PSPRS liability of $30 million that's not going away and your payments are increasing? We have a couple options. Do nothing, okay, which is probably going to be a challenge for you. You can amend your current PSPRS policy, and you can continue to throw significant budget dollars at the liability. As Mike said, contributions plus investment pays your benefits and your expenses. So there's a contribution. Keep throwing general fund at it. That's tough for our cities because your general fund's under so much pressure. Fair? I mean, your infrastructure needs, your employee needs are incredible. Possibly a separate tax levy or a revenue increase. Let's try to avoid that. City of Prescott is the only city in the state that I'm aware of at the moment, for the most part, that actually had a sales tax increase to address the problem. Okay? As a result of the big fire up there, as you know, and they were a charter city. They got it passed. It was kind of amazing that they got it passed. So that's how they're throwing more contributions at theirs over time. Or the third one is essentially, can we refinance this like a mortgage? Can we swap? Can we get a better interest rate than 7.3%? Can the city of Douglas potentially issue bonds backed by the city at a lower rate, restructure the debt, and see what kind of savings potentially? And that's what I want to share with you this evening. With that, I'm going to pause. Mr. Mayor, please.
Mark, real quick, that 7.3%, and I don't know if Mike needs answers or if you know the answer to this, is that set up by state statute, or is that due to what they're seeing at the retirement system?
Yeah, that's based on the actuarial. Mr. Townsend brought up the whole actuarial.
So that's where that's.
You get an actuarial report every year from PSPRS. It's all the math. It's all the economics. When are people going to retire and all that?
So that could go to 7.5 or it could go to 6.9.
It could go higher. It could go down. Right now it's 7.3%. Okay. All good so far, Mr. Mayor? Okay. Very good. Thank you. Okay. So Mike talked on this. I'll just show you real quick. I kind of like this slide. So, and Mike had this in his, so I'm going to go real fast. So here's our police. Okay. Here's the liabilities. The present value calculation of the liabilities, if you remember. And here's how much money you have in the irrevocable trust at PSPRS. This money's working real hard for you, right? The problem is you're almost 18 million unfunded. That's where our challenge is. We have some assets in there. It's invested, but our present value of our liability is so large that this is what's really causing the significant budget increases each year. Okay? That fund at 730 we talked about, you're 31% funded. Okay? Flagstaff was 33% funded. Bisbee 6% funded. Some are 100% funded. You guys over here are in the lower quartile over here, and about 2.5% quartile around the state. So you're on the lower end at the 30% like Flagstaff was, okay? Fire over here, same thing. We got 5.6 million in assets going to work with Mr. Townsend at PSPRS, 17 million, present value liabilities, 12 million, okay? All right. This keeps, can you move that up a little bit, or is there something I can do? Okay. Let me park here for just a moment. I'm going to start right here. This is your unfunded liability payments to PSPRS for police, for your police department. Remember? So this is what we've entered into with PSPRS. And if you do nothing at all to address the unfunded liability, we're just talking about the unfunded liability here. These are your budget payments to PSPRS for just police. You're about $1,250,000, 2021. Okay? And you can see it's going to go to I'm going to round if you don't mind, based on the current actuarial report, it's going to go to 3.7 million. So what we did here to help you, you can see it's going to triple. That makes sense? So if we do nothing at all, how are we going to address this? Okay, that's our challenge. Now this is your total payroll costs. Okay? This is the normal cost here. So in addition to your unfunded liability with your employees, you're still contributing to the pension plan, right? For ongoing. And you can see that's at 204, and that's starting to go down because we're shifting to Tier 3. Now remember, the Tier 3 was a real game changer to help us address this unfunded pension liability through Prop 124. So the good news is, you see your normal costs going down. This is your percentage of your payroll of your normal costs, and look how high your unfunded is. So I'm not going to get into a lot of mathy anymore tonight, but I wanted to share with you, this impacts your budget right here, and we have an issue going forward. Okay, same thing. This is fire. Fire goes from 816 roughly, and fire is going to go to 2.3 million in 2038. Okay, so kind of the same math, about almost 3 times. And then I'm going to go to the next page. We just combined police and fire to put this into perspective for you. At 2.1 million this budget year, going to 6 million. Call it almost 3 times what it is now over the next really 17, 18 years. Okay? And what I've learned, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, as a practitioner working in Arizona over the years as it relates to PSPRS, is I honestly, to be honest with you, I didn't know that this was really going on. We knew about the unfunded portion, right? In your case, 30 million. Rating agencies would ask us, investors would ask us, and basically our response is we're going to manage our way through this. Okay? And I think one of the positive things that have come out of our discussion with Flagstaff and other jurisdictions considering this is now we have a plan. And that people are comforted in that. And so that's been a very positive component of our discussions in Arizona the last 6 months. Okay, that's the background of your unfunded liability. We knew you knew that. 30 million, accelerating payments, probably going to 3 times. All right, what can we do about it? We talked about the 3 options. Here's one of the positive things of COVID. If there's any positives, there's very few positives, in my view, except that we're at an all-time historical low interest rate market, as you all know. Mortgages are being refinanced. I want to say you can get, I checked the other day, on a 22-year refinance, I could get 2.5%. On a 30-year, I'm hearing high 2s, low 3s. So no secret to the council that we're blessed to have this market. This is the 10-year U.S. Treasury. If we proceed with a pension refinancing bond issue for the city of Douglas, we're going to sell them on a taxable basis, not tax exempt like we do for infrastructure. Your rate's a tad bit higher. The 10-year treasury today was about a 0.67%. So if you wanted to buy a 10-year treasury, you could write a check to the federal government and they're going to give you less than 1% for 10 years. I'm not in on that. I don't know about you all. I gotta get something a little higher than that. But anyway, you guys, you get the point. The good news is if we were to consider this, now is a good time. Okay. In working with staff, we came up with kind of a pro forma hypothetical scenario here where we would issue somewhere around $33 million in revenue bonds for your city. I'm going to walk you through that in a moment. Okay? They're not property tax bonds, they would be revenue bonds, which is very common around our state. Okay? Now here's our, if we do nothing at all, we just showed you the curve. We would issue hypothetically $33 million. We would deposit $29.9 million, or almost $30 million, with Mr. Townsend. At which time your city would be 100% funded, not 33% funded. That's good news. Okay? We're going to talk a quick concept here, and I don't want to really get in the weeds too much. We have incorporated in here at the moment a contingency reserve fund. Flagstaff did this. My colleagues Omar and Rusta introduced this concept, and the thought with a contingency reserve fund would be to set aside money, the city's asset, held locally by the city, not tied to the bond issue, that would allow you to continue to manage this liability over the next 15, 20 years. Okay? We're going to be 100% funded at closing, but that doesn't mean in the future that we won't have somewhat of an unfunded liability. And if there's a miss on the actuarial side, okay, actuarial expenses go up based on people living longer, what have you, or let's say we don't get, PSPRS doesn't get the 730 return, that's their current estimate, then you're going to have a little creep in your liability, and you can use your reserve fund to continue to manage that liability over time, so you're not dipping into your general fund to continue to manage it. Okay? So we can dig into this. It's been a long night, and we've talked about a lot of math. If you want to dig in, let's do it. We've introduced it to staff, to our city manager, and they like it, and Flagstaff did it, and all the clients we're working with right now are seriously considering it so that we can continue to manage it. Okay? All right. Bear with us on this. We think this is conservative. We think that if we moved forward with a bond issue for your city, we're going to be in the 3% money range, down from the 730. Okay, Flagstaff was 2.69%. We did that transaction in July. A AA rated city. We helped them manage it through the COVID crisis, the rating agency process. I think you're a well-run city. We're thinking we can get you in the A+ range. Good rating. Educate folks on our economy, our very unique economy in Douglas, but an economy that's doing all in all well. And we think that we can manage through it. We're confident we can get you in that A category. Love to get you in the AA- category, but with COVID, we're not seeing a lot of those. And if so, we've assumed here about 380 money, but we think that's conservative at the moment. So let's go with it for now. Flagstaff was 270 money, 269 money. I think we're a tad bit conservative. Let's go with it.
Yeah. Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Please. Can you flesh out the idea of the taxable bond as opposed to the non-taxable?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I guess he wants to go a little deep tonight. So, no, I appreciate the question. No, very good question. So, Congress gave cities and towns a tax-free exemption as a way to lower your interest rate if you do public infrastructure, obviously, and our school superintendent and done that. So In the future, if we issue bonds for your city, the interest income to the investors is exempt from federal and state taxation, so you can borrow a lower rate. Investors will take a lower interest rate because they don't have to pay taxes on their interest income, obviously. Congress did not give us the authority, if we issue taxable bonds, to issue them on a tax exempt basis, so therefore we're going to go on the taxable municipal market. That means obviously whoever buys these bonds will earn interest from your city, and that interest income will be taxed. Sound good? And so we're just using a little higher interest rate. Still a good, strong market, and there's a lot of investors out there that that enjoy and appreciate taxable in this market, taxable municipal bond paper. Was that helpful, Mr. Lindeman?
Yeah, it was. I was also an employee of the school at that time when we went through all that.
Yep.
Okay.
And so, but my question then, and I think you covered it, but does the investor really want to buy a taxable bond, or do they want to go for the municipal tax rate?
They love the municipal taxable bonds because of where interest rates are, and interest rates are so low on the tax exempt side that they love the taxable good, strong taxable municipals. Flagstaff, we had 130 million that we issued. We had 470 million of orders.
Okay, thank you.
That answers it right there. Yeah.
And we do a really good job of educating investors to come in, and we want to get a lot of orders for you so we can drive that interest rate.
Is it also the security, Mark, that cities are able to offer
Yes.
as well to back those bonds? So there's more security that cities will pay back these debts. So that's another benefit.
That's right. Okay, so all good there. So there's kind of our dollars to Mr. Townsend, PSPRS, and a preliminary contingency reserve fund of about 2.6 that we'll walk you through later in terms of how that is sized. We're looking at about $13.6 million in savings. I'm going to walk you through that in a moment. I like that. And on a present value basis, we're looking conservatively over 10 million. I think I like that. Okay? All right. Let's look at this spreadsheet. And I know our IT professional is going to give us. So the nice thing about a pension refinancing bond, if I can use that term, we use different terms, so bear with me, is that if we do this, we can restructure our debt any way we want that fits within your public policy goals. Okay? So if you look at column 2 here, if you recognize this, that was police and fire. We just combined them here. That's not going away. If we refinance this out, this column goes away. We're no longer on the hook for that, right? And the way we structured this presently with staff, and the cool thing about pension bonds, we can put your savings anywhere you want. And we ran multiple scenarios, but let's go with this one for now. Staff, and we believe council will agree, feels it would be in our best interest to correct this and come up with more of a level debt service structure and correct a legacy problem that could be huge in the future, take advantage of a historical low interest rate market, okay, and restructure our payments at around ultimately no more than about 2.75 million. You see this? And over the next couple of years, it's a little less because we don't want to increase what you're paying now. We're going to give you a little savings over the next 4. You see this right here? This structure doesn't assume you're doing this for cash flow upfront savings. Now, we can do that, and some cities and towns have done that. Some cities have asked us, because of COVID, to give us a little debt relief over the next couple of years while we manage our way out of it. This scenario isn't really doing that. Yes, sir.
How come you came up with the number of 33?
33 million?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We'll go back here. See
Couldn't
the-
get more relief, increase the amount?
Yeah, on this page here, if I can take you back one page, this 33 million, that's what you're referring to?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay, we came up with that. We got 30 million here. That's what your unfunded liability is.
Right, 29 million.
And the reserve fund that we've sized in, at least at the moment, about 2.6 million.
Right.
And we have to add some professional costs in here that we're getting our arms around. But those three items come up with the 33.4 million. Now, this assumes you want to go 100% funded.
Can we go above that?
Generally, we don't go above that. You don't want to above it and give more assets to PSPRS, okay? Go 100% funded initially, like Flagstaff did, and then use your reserve fund. If we have some misses in the future, then we'll go ahead and tap the reserve fund to get you back to 100% every year. So, most of our middle market cities like the 100% funding concept. Some of our larger cities, because their unfunded liability is so huge in the billions, that it's really hard to kind of get there on $1 billion pension financing versus a 33 million. I hope that answered your question.
I was just wondering if we could have a little bit more leeway for the city of Douglas. I mean, we're covering the debt of the city of fire, but actually there's no room for us to use it as money. You know what I mean? For improvements.
Well, it's, if I may, Mr. Roland, it's two separate issues, and so we can't mix being able to do those things. This has to take care of specifically of this, and that's how we get our ratings, that's how we get our interest rate and all those kind of things. So it has to be specific of what we're doing.
Right, just potentials.
Yeah.
Right. We will talk additional bonding for all the other infrastructure needs that we anticipate coming up.
So we can only acquire enough bonds just to cover the debt.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll address this issue, and I do have some slides on other questions related to future debt issuance to the extent that you want to go there. Yes, sir. Mr. Graham, I think.
Oh, no.
You're good.
My questions were answered.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, how are we doing so far?
I've got one more quick question.
Please.
It may or may not be pertinent this time, but as an investor, to buy a bond of this type, what kind of return would they expect?
Let's go here. Move that up a little bit if you don't mind. So the investor, similar to our school bonds, we're going to have principal and interest payments coming due each year. And as an investor, you say to yourself, how long do I want to invest my money before I get it back? And then I get interest in the meantime, okay? I don't buy anything over 10 years anymore because I'm getting a little long in the tooth, so I keep to about 10 years myself. So the return that you would get as an investor would be a function of how long you want to tie your money up. The shorter your principal payments, the lower your interest rate, and the longer, the higher your interest rate to compensate you for inflation and potential risk in the transaction.
Okay, so if we went 10,
Yeah.
5%,
On your transaction?
do you think?
No. Our average rate right now, we think conservatively is the 350, the 380. That's an average over 20 years. So your first year would be 0.75.
Okay.
Your second year would be 0.9. Bear with me, I'll get you this detail in our next session. And then each year out, you get.
Well, I was just thinking, as an investor, if I were gonna put in my money for 10 years, and then I'd still have to pay taxes on the return, well, I'm a little iffy on that. I think I'd go with the municipal tax free.
Yeah.
Hey, Mr. Reader, could I ask the council, does anybody need a break? I mean, also feel free to stand up if you need to stand up, not a problem.
For about 5-10 minutes, depending upon your questions from being done, so.
Okay.
Okay.
Is that okay with everybody? Okay.
Okay, so be thinking about, if you move forward, what structure you like. So again, this one here chops your mountain down and gets your budget stability here. See this? This is what I think you would like. This is what Flagstaff wanted to do.
We can't see your pointer, Mark, just so you know.
Third column. I keep thinking.
If you want to point that way, you can, but.
Okay.
I don't know if it'll reach.
Sorry about that, third column, it doesn't, so in the third column, that would be your new amortization schedule versus the second column, which is your current amortization schedule. And I just wanted to share with you, as you think this through, if you want a different structure somehow, some way, let us know. And we're glad to structure it in the way you want that fits your. Flagstaff paid theirs off 8 years early because they threw a little more budget money at it. They had the general fund capacity to get this darn liability off their books.
How many years ago did they start that?
Did they start?
Yes, start the payments.
Oh, on our refinancing?
Right.
We just did it in July,
Oh.
and
They wanted a shorter term.
their liability went out, their PSPRS amortization went out
Okay, yeah.
28 years. Okay, they had a 28-year amortization, and they wanted a 20-year, and they wanted 8.5 million level debt. And theirs was going to 20, almost 20.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
I
so.
don't know if we can afford something like that. But
No, yeah, it'd be nice. So this, I like, personally, I like this, this structure. I think staff had suggested they like this one, but just wanted you to be. So here's your cash flow savings, the fourth column. You're saving a bunch of money out long, and you can see based on the numbers, that's 13.2 million in savings and 13.3 million there in your, that's your annual save, about 13.3 million. Present value, I think we had about 10.6.
So, Mr. Grijalva, you can start getting excited somewhere around 2031. Start getting some significant money in there. The saving.
Okay, so all in all positive. So let's talk about risks. Well, we always want to be transparent with risks, and this is a slide that kind of discusses risks, and the long and the short of it, without getting too mathy, is as long as PSPRS can earn a return greater than your borrowing rate. And we got 384 in the model now. We're hoping that Flagstaff 269, drive that down. As long as Mr. Townsend works hard, and obviously he doesn't guarantee, but can get a return of greater than, in your case for now, 3.84, then you would not be worse off by doing a pension bond. Fair? On top of it, you fix the negative amortization and you level out the debt service each year, which is more manageable for your budget. So, that's why we've asked Mr. Townsend to come in the room to help educate you on the direction of PSPRS. And Mike is the first one to tell you there's been some misses in the past. But under his leadership and his new staff and his board and his governorship and how they make their investment decisions, most of our clients are getting more comfortable with PSPRS than the previous situation. So we leave that up to the city. Mike is available on multiple phone calls. I know that staff has gone to the website. I think Mike had a slide in his presentation that had a 1-year return of 5.5, a 3-year return 8.1, the last 7 years 7.5, and the last 10 years about 8.2% in terms of an overall average return on their portfolio. Okay? So we've got some spread, as they say. We have, in a low interest rate environment, we do mitigate our risk in connection with a pension bond, and just wanted to share that with you. If we closed the bond issue and we wired $30 million to Mr. Townsend for the city, and 2 weeks later the market, went down, 30%, then we got to dig our way out of the hole. And so that's the market risk associated with it. The portfolio is very diversified. It's $11 billion, roughly, from around the state. And they've got it spread out into a number of different sectors. They call asset allocation, real estate, stocks, international, a lot of very technical, hard money lending, that type of thing. So we wanted to have this slide for you to think about. We're glad to answer any questions on that side of the equation, which we hope is helpful to you.
Hold on, Mark, we have a question.
Yes.
Please.
What, I know you just explained the rate of return and what the average has been in the last few years, but is there any idea of what it was during the last major recession? What was that rate of return? How low did it drop?
Yeah, is Mike still with us? Mike may not have been with us.
What,
Oh, there he is. Mike, you got a question? There he is. You might.
What was the question?
So I know that there's there's just an explanation about the rate of return the last few years. What was the rate of return during the last major recession? How low did that rate go?
I would have to go look at that. I couldn't tell you what that number is. I can get back to you with that.
Okay.
I could work with Don Prince on that.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a really good question. One more technical item, and I know that Mike can help me with this, and maybe Omar. So what the fund does is they have a smoothing. So their returns are going to do this, right? We just shared with you. We'll get you the answer on that. The returns over the last 10 years. And so the fund will have its ups and downs because that's the nature of a pension fund return model. But what they do to help with the actuarial calculations is they do a smoothing of the returns. Does that make sense? They call it a 7-year smoothing on the return. So that takes some of the volatility out of some of the returns such that when your actuarial report comes out, which changes your amortization schedule, you have a smoothing of a return that helps that volatility. Does that make sense? So I just wanted to share that with you, and I know that we spent some time with staff.
And Mark,
yeah,
Mark, this is Omar, and good evening, supervisors and chair. Thank you for a really good question. If obviously the 1 year, that 2008, 2009 is a big question. But as Mark said, there's the 7-year smoothing. And if you look over the last 10-year period, the average of PSPRS returns, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, was approximately 8.2%, slightly above, actually significantly above the actuarial rate. And so, when you think of risk, in that sense, it's not like, one, you can look at equity risk and say, oh, gee, I'm concerned, there's, some huge number that was present for a minute in 2008. But PSPRS's portfolio is diversified across a variety of asset classes. So you wouldn't be likely to see that whole equity risk. There's some non-correlated assets. But I do think that 10-year number is probably most instructive in thinking about returns.
Yeah, thank you for that, Omar. And just to kind of give you kind of a realm of kind of how that works. I worked with my chief investment officer, and we were actually looking at just basic stock returns over the past few recessions. So if you go back to the Great Recession, 2008, 2009, but even the dot-com bubble in the early 2000s, one of the major stock indices is the Standard & Poor's 500. In each of those events, the Standard & Poor's dropped over 20% each time. But when you calculate what that drop was, that 20% drop, and then you take the future returns through those growth cycles, it averages out to well above the 7.3% that we have. So that 7.3 is not, we don't think we're going to get that every year. That's what we think the long term is going to be on an average across all of those years.
Okay, very good questions. Let's move quickly here. Okay, so we've got some other information for you for your nighttime reading when you get home. on the contingency reserve fund.
There'll be a quiz on Friday for you teachers.
Okay, so we chatted about a lot of this, good stuff in here. Okay, let me just go here with you in case council wants to move forward. I want to just give you some reminders here. I know you know a lot of this, but again, the city has not issued a lot of debt in the past. Okay? The city did a financing. I'm gonna come back to this. Let me go here to this page. The city did a financing in 2008. I think you're all aware of it, to acquire the building in which the call center sits. That was a taxable financing because you leased it to a for-profit company, and as I understand it, that's been a good partnership. And I've seen other communities that have call centers where it hasn't gone good, so I would compliment you on that. It's my understanding that the lease payments cover the bond payment.
I was just saying on the council when that happened.
Okay, good job. So, all good. So, when you did this financing in 2008, it was $9 million. You're paying it down. Got another $375. I think we're going to end up refinancing this, by the way. We'll come back to that later. Okay, when you did this financing, as you recall, for the council members who weren't on move back up on that page. These are the revenues that the city pledged to the transaction. So what, very common in Arizona. We're pretty blessed in Arizona, unless you're a charter city, right? You all, under your charter, can pledge revenues, okay? And these are the revenues that your city pledged on that transaction. Excise taxes, your local sales tax revenues, that's your lifeblood, isn't it? As it is in all cities. We have our state shared revenues that come back on a pro rata basis based on population. State shared sales, state shared income taxes. Okay, on this transaction, you also pledge the lease revenues from the company. Okay, and so we wanted to share that with you. And then this is your, that are still outstanding. And I'm going to take you to page 15. Clean that one up there a little bit. Page 15. One more page. One more page up. So we wanted to share with you all of those revenues. So the investor that bought those bonds, you pledge these revenues. Doesn't preclude you from using them, but if there was a meltdown, then the investor gets paid first in our state, and you can see what the revenues are. Now, your local sales tax revenues up on top, you had a banner year in 1920 at $7.5 million. And then COVID hit. So in 2021, you all, in your budget sessions, rightfully so, budgeted conservatively at about 6.7. And we're hoping, obviously, with some of the good news of people, shopping locally, if you will, and things of that nature, that's going to come in higher. And then we have our licenses and permits, fines and forfeitures, and then our state shared sales income and our VLT, vehicle license taxes. So we're about, probably conservatively, about $12 million. Okay? So if we do another transaction, our pension bond financing will be done on a similar basis, except that we can't pledge towards that payment the lease payments on the call center. No big deal. We're not worried about that. Okay? So here's in column 2, I keep looking up here, my apologies. Column 2, there's our $12 million. Column 3 is our call center payments. Okay? So we got to account for those, and then we sized in our $33 million transaction, hypothetically, pro forma, to get to the debt service numbers that we talked about before, that level debt at 2.7 that we think we like at the moment. And then it shows in the other two columns the amount of coverage. So for every dollar of debt your city has, we have, as you can see in column 8 and 9, really about 3.6 times in revenue to cover it. Okay, so that's what's called very strong coverage for our cities. And if we move forward, we would structure this similar to what we have up here. Okay? So you'll see that again if we continue to work together. Okay, that's pretty much it, except I'm going to go through the calendar here. It's really up to the city. If you think you like this refinancing alternative tool in the toolbox versus doing nothing at all, or versus addressing it through more contributions from your general fund, and you want to move forward, this is a calendar that would allow us to move forward expeditiously, for lack of a better term, and actually get the transaction completed, structured, done, approved by council, and into the bond market, and closed by the end of the year. We have now essentially a November 12th is probably, if you want to move forward, the council meeting we've identified. At that meeting, you would adopt a resolution that would authorize us, working closely with staff and keeping council informed, of course, to move forward and parallel track the credit rating process, the paperwork process, the disclosure process, all the stuff that we have to do, as you know, and be in a position to sell the bonds probably, it looks like, first week of December, and close it by the end of the year. So it's a hypothetical calendar. We're ready to move if you are. If you want to move it faster or you want to move it slower, then we'll look to council and staff to get us direction on that front. And with that, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you for being so patient. We know it's been a long evening on a complicated subject matter. Hope that was helpful. Glad to answer any more questions.
Mr. Mayor?
Please.
Can I just ask Mark to just go over one last thing before I shoot over to you? Mark, can you just talk about our ability to finance other things in the future, for instance, infrastructure? Because I think that we do have some infrastructure projects that we're interested in, and so how this may impact that or not.
Yes. Cities, schools, as you know, are a whole different breed. But cities, if you want to move forward with public infrastructure, which we know you need, it wears out, it's expensive. A couple of ways you can do it. If you have budget capacity, and I know you increased your sales tax recently, last year I believe it was. If you want to use some of that revenue and do a revenue bond, which does not require voter approval, we can go ahead and incorporate, and we'll double check the numbers, we can incorporate a revenue bond structure for the city of Douglas after you do the pension bond. Okay? And again, that comes back to budget capacity within the general fund budget. So we can structure a revenue bond for that. If those revenues are tight and you want to proceed with a property tax like our schools do, you want to do a property tax levy that is outside the realm of what we talked about this evening, because it's a property tax-based system. So glad to...
And that would require voter approval.
That one will require voter approval next November, a year from now. And there's capacity constraints, and I was asked by staff to attend a study session, probably, I thought it was October, Luis, so that I can come back and share with you what I just described and have it on paper so you have a better feel for it.
Just for council's edification, on October 28th, we plan on having our street study available to us and what that cost will be and possible options for funding it. And that's why we invited Mr. Reeder back to give us some of those possibilities to do that. Okay, any questions? I truly appreciate you walking us through this. It was quite a bit, but it's something that we need to address. And so I truly appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
You explained it in a way that I actually understood it, so I'm not going to go asking after the meeting what this meant. I actually understood it, so I appreciate it.
That's the ultimate compliment. We appreciate that very, very much, because we do try to...
You better believe that one, too.
And Mr. Townsend and Omar and Roosta?
They've all had a long day. I wonder if they're asleep yet. No, there's Omar, there's Roosta. Roosta's in Chicago, by the way.
Oh,
Roosta,
oh, she's up way late.
we did not hear from Roosta, and we'd like to at least hear from her.
Roosta, you're on.
Yes, I am. Good evening, everyone.
Well, thank you so much for being patient with us and being available.
Now, just real quick before we go, just so you know, Roosta is I think, an actuary. So she and Mike get along really well, okay?
Well, Omar and Roosta and Mike, we'd like to invite you to Douglas. Anytime you'd like to come over here, the door's open, and we'll make sure that you see all the wonderful area of southeast Arizona. It's a beautiful place, and just come hungry, because we're going to feed you well.
Oh, that sounds good. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you very much. Would very much this opportunity. Hopefully, one travel becomes easier.
Yes.
Thank you again. Thanks for the opportunity to join you tonight, and hopefully in person sometime very soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good night.
Not hearing any more questions. Item number 6, adjournment. May I have a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
Motion by the Johnny on the spot, Mr. Shelton, waiting for his opportunity to make a motion for adjournment. Seconded by Mrs. Morales. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed by nay? Motion carries. We stand adjourned.